Right, so we're going to start off this morning's session then looking at the muscular system. So with regards to the muscular system, we're going to go through the following. So identifying the types of muscle tissue and looking at their characteristics. We'll describe the structure of skeletal muscle, identify how muscles attach to the skeleton. When it comes to naming and locating the main muscles, I'll basically have an activity for you to do for that in your own time because it's very difficult to do that via a Teams call. We'll then look at the structure and function of the pelvic floor muscles, looking at describing muscle actions and identifying different muscle fiber types and their characteristics. Okay, so first of all, there are three types of muscle tissue. Can anybody tell me what they are? Three types of muscle tissue.
Voluntary.
Voluntary is one.
Involuntary.
Involuntary, and then one more.
Cardiac.
Cardiac, good. Okay, so as you said, we've got voluntary muscle first of all. So skeletal or striated muscle involved in exercise and under the conscious control of the nervous system. So when we look at skeletal muscle, we can see the striations, we can see the lines of muscle fibers as they run through the muscle. It is skeletal, so it's attached to the skeletal system, so it's involved in exercise and movement and activity. When we say it's under the conscious control of the nervous system, what that means is that we have control of it. We decide to contract and relax those muscles. Whereas when it comes to involuntary muscle, this is smooth muscle found in places like the digestive tract, the artery walls, and as we look at it, it is smooth to look at. It's under the unconscious control of the nervous system. So we don't decide to contract or relax these muscles. So if you think about it, when you eat some food and you swallow it, the digestive system, so the muscles within the digestive system, so the muscles of the esophagus, the muscles within the stomach wall, and the intestines, they will contract and relax to break down food and to move it along the digestive system. We have no control over that. We can't stop that from happening. Similarly, with the artery walls, as blood flows through the body, the walls of the arteries will contract and relax. We cannot control that. We can't stop that from happening. So with skeletal muscle, we have control. We decide to contract and relax it. When it comes to involuntary muscle, smooth muscle, we have no control over whether they contract or relax. Then our final one is the cardiac muscle, as we looked at yesterday. So the cardiac muscle is striated, so it looks like a voluntary muscle. However, it is involuntary. It will contract and relax under the unconscious control of the nervous system. It's a specialist heart muscle. Contraction of the heart is controlled by the sinoatrial node. So this is your internal, your natural pacemaker. So it keeps the set rhythm of the heart, on average about 72 beats per minute. And this is called autorhythmicity. Okay, so our three muscle tissue types: voluntary, involuntary, and cardiac. Standing alone on its own, the cardiac myocardium heart muscle. Okay, so what we're going to look at in a little bit more detail now is voluntary muscle. Obviously, that's used in exercise, so we need to know a little bit more about it. And to break it all down, it looks a little bit like this. Right. So what we've got first of all is the muscle is attached to the bone. Okay, so for muscles to work or for movement to occur, I should say, the muscles need to pull on the bones to create that movement and create that leverage. So the muscle is attached to the bone. Can anybody tell me what attaches muscle to bone?
Tendon, yeah?
Tendon. Yeah. So yeah, so the tendon. So the muscle is attached to the bone by the tendon. So if we remember from yesterday looking at the skeletal system, the tendon will cross a joint and attach to the bone by the periosteum. So the periosteum being that cling film type substance that surrounds the diaphyses of the bone, really tough substance that allows muscle attachment as well as giving the bone its blood supply and nerve supply. Okay, so as we can see with our main muscle here, we've got an outer layer which will cover the muscle, holding our bundles of muscle fibers together. So this outer layer is called the epimysium. So the epimysium is what's called muscle fascia, which wraps all of the bundles of muscle fibers together and holds them in position and gives it the shape of the muscle. Inside that epimysium, then, we've got all our bundles of muscle fibers. So the medical term for a bundle of muscle fibers is called a fasciculi. Each fasciculi has got its own fascia or wrap around it. So that wrap is called the perimysium. So you've got the epimysium on the outside, our perimysium, which wraps around a bundle of muscle fibers. Within that perimysium, then, we've got our individual muscle fibers. Each individual muscle fiber has got its own wrap, okay, and that wrap is called the endomysium. So you've got epimysium on the outside, our perimysium surrounding the bundle of muscle fibers, and the endomysium surrounding an individual muscle fiber. Within our endomysium, then, within our muscle fiber, so one muscle fiber is about 1/3 of a hair as width, and even inside there, we've got what's called myofibrils. And our myofibrils are broken into chain-like lengths called sarcomeres all the way down along and branching back into our muscle fiber, our bundle of muscle fibers, and the muscle itself. Okay, so what I've got on the next slide is a description of each of those elements. So the bone, so body movements are controlled by the actions of muscles pulling on the bone. Bones are covered with periosteum onto which tendons are attached. The tendon itself is a tough inelastic fiber that wraps around the end of the muscle and attaches it to the outer layer of the bone, the periosteum. The epimysium is the tough membrane that surrounds the whole muscle belly and holds the smaller fasciculi units together. So fasciculi meaning bundle of muscle fibers. The perimysium is the membrane that surrounds the bundles of muscle fibers, which are called fasciculi. The endomysium is the membrane that surrounds the individual muscle fibers, which contain the myofibrils. And the myofibrils are the smallest unit or fibril within the individual muscle fiber. It's made up of smaller units or chain-like lengths called sarcomeres, which are the working units of the muscle. So what we can do is, if I go back up to our diagram, you can use this diagram and then the descriptions on the next slide to kind of figure out which one is which. But what we remember is that our epimysium is the outer layer, the perimysium would be our inner layer, and the endomysium would be our deep tissue layer. Okay, so epi meaning outer, peri medium, and endo on the inner layer. Any questions, or would you like me to recap that?
I mean, are we going to be expected to remember every facet of these words and descriptions?
Good question. I can't predict what will come up on the paper. There may be a question asking you which one of the following describes perimysium, for example, or it could ask you which of the following is the membrane that surrounds the bundle of muscle fibers. I can't predict what's going to come up on the paper on the exam. Sorry to be a pain. Okay, would you like me to recap that? Or shall we move on? Sorry, I can't see you guys.
No, we're okay here. That's fine. We got it.
Sure. Okay, Sinead, Sarah, you guys okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, all good.
Cool. Okay. So as always, I'll be sending these slides out and everything as well as along with some extra resources. So the next section that we're going to look at then is the sliding filament theory. So does anybody know, or has anybody heard of the sliding filament theory, what it tells us, what it states?
No idea, to be honest.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so the sliding filament theory is all about a muscle contraction and how a muscle contraction occurs. So we've got our diagram on the right-hand side here. What we've got in this diagram is one sarcomere. So this top section here, so this is stage 1, the middle section here is stage 2, and the bottom section here is stage 3 of a muscle contraction. So we've got the sarcomere. So these blue sections at the end here are the ends of the sarcomere. We've got our smaller fibrils, which are the actin elements, and our larger element, which is myosin. So we've got actin and myosin within that sarcomere. What happens is when we've got energy, so energy is attached to the myosin head. So these sections here are the myosin head. When energy is released, that myosin head will lift up and nod, pulling the ends of the sarcomere together and actin together, shortening the length of the muscle. So actin is pulled together and length is reduced within the muscle. So the sliding filament theory states that when the myosin head or cross bridge nods, it pulls the ends of the sarcomere and actin together, causing a muscle contraction. So within this unit here, the myosin head, when energy is released, it will lift up, attached to actin, as we've got here. It will nod on either side, pulling the actin together and ends of the sarcomere together. And that happens all the way through our sarcomeres, all the way through our muscle fibers, all the way through the individual muscle fibers within our bundles, and all the way through our muscle. Does that make sense? Wait a second, I can't see you guys. Is that making sense?
Yeah. Just to clarify, the diagram you've got of the sliding filament theory, is that representing what is going on inside the muscle fiber?
Yes. So if I show you, so you can see my laser pointer, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this here, so if I just show you this element here, so we've got the orange kind of unit here, the red in the middle, and then the orange here. If I go right back up to here, that's just one section of this. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in that one, in that diagram. And that happens all the way through. So if we think about the chain-like length, so the actin pulling together, shortening, so each element of this will shorten, and that kind of chain-like reaction will happen the whole way through the muscle. So from our muscle being lengthened to shortened all the way through.
So the diagram in the sliding filament theory represents every one of those lines in the myofibril.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, exactly that. And this here, that's one sarcomere, but it contains kind of multiple of the other diagram, if that makes sense. Okay, so we've got sarcomere here, sarcomere here, sarcomere here, another one here, and another one here. And then in our diagram, we've literally just got one of those sections. Okay, I've got a video that I'll send to you, which kind of animates this. But the video, I'm not a massive fan of the video. I'm trying to find a better one, because in the video that I'm going to send you, it's got lots of extra information that you don't need to know about. So it starts talking about troponin and tropomyosin and things like that, which you don't need to know about. So I'll send it, and then you can kind of view it, but try to kind of ignore the extra big words that it's talking about. But you'll see how the action occurs where the myosin head lifts up and nods. So can anybody tell me what's required for a muscle contraction to occur? So I mentioned one thing, there's another one as well. So what do we need for a muscle contraction to happen?
Movement.
So it creates movement, but what do we need to take on board for us to be able to continue muscle contractions? Okay, so energy is what's required. So we need energy for muscle contraction to occur, and we also need calcium for that to happen. Okay, so we need energy, we need calcium, and then the message being sent. So when we look at nervous system later on, we'll talk a little bit more about how the nervous system creates a muscle contraction to occur. But we need energy and we need calcium for that myosin head to lift up and nod, to bring the ends of the sarcomere and actin together, creating a muscle contraction. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that there, then ping you the video straight after this session. You can have a look at it, and then we'll pick it up again at the start of 12 o'clock session, if that's okay. But before I do that, has anybody got any other questions before I do move on?
No, I think that's plenty to go on right now.
Okay, cool.
No, all good.
You,
Good.
Do you need it?
we said about tendons.
Say that again, sorry.
You know, we said about the tendons.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a tendon and a ligament? Are they
Okay.
similar?
No, totally different. Two totally different things. So if you remember yesterday, we spoke about a ligament attaches bone to bone.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm here. A tendon attaches muscle to bone.
Oh, right. Okay.
So two totally separate things. And remember, because that question comes up a lot on the paper. What attaches muscle to bone, or what attaches bone to bone, or a ligament does what job, etc. So that question comes up a lot. So ligament, if we think about a ligament as a link, so it links bones to bones. If we think about a tendon as tension, so we've got tension in the muscle, so a tendon attaches muscle to bone. Okay, so think tendon, tension, think ligament, a link, bone
Okay.
to bone.
Thanks.
Is that okay? Cool. Okay, so next section then we're going to look at a little bit more detail is our muscle attachments. So as we've kind of chatted about, muscles attached to the skeleton via tendons. So muscle fascia, which is that epimysium layer on the outside, okay, that converges to form a tendon which attaches to the bone. So it attaches to the periosteum, that thick, that tough outer layer that surrounds the shaft of the bone. So the muscle fascia will converge, form a tough tendon which will cross the joint and attach onto the periosteum of the bone. We've also got aponeurosis. So these are flattened tendons of other muscles. So for example, with the abdominals, so if we think about the abdominals as being our 8-pack, so we've got two that will sit beside each other, another two underneath, another two underneath, and another two underneath. For those muscles to kind of stay together, we've got what's called aponeurosis. So they join together, which are flattened tendons of other muscles, so joining together to hold. So if we think about during pregnancy, as the fetus grows, that aponeurosis will open up, so allowing the abdominals to widen to allow the fetus then to grow as well. Okay, so we've got aponeurosis, which are flattened tendons of other muscles. The other way is that muscle will attach directly onto the bone just by muscle fascia. It won't even have a tendon or aponeurosis. It will literally just attach straight onto the bone. Now, not to jinx anything, but I have never seen a question come up asking about aponeurosis. I've only seen questions, and I've seen them regularly asking about tendons. Okay, no. I don't want to say it's not going to come up, but I've never seen a question come up about aponeurosis. But be aware of it, that it's not just tendons that attach muscles to the skeleton. Okay, so general rules for muscles. First of all, our muscles, they pull. They don't push, they pull. So for us to create a push movement, hopefully you can see me. So if I'm doing a chest press, for example, this movement here. So as I push forwards, what's happening is the pectoralis major muscle is pulling the humerus across the body, and the triceps are pulling the radius and ulna to extend the arm. So for me to do a push action, my muscles are pulling. So the muscle will cross the joint, pull on the bone. So triceps will cross the elbow to pull on the bone to create that movement. So muscles pull. So when they shorten, as they cross the joint, they will pull the bone on the other side into position to create the action that we desire. A muscle crosses at least one joint. Okay, so it crosses at least one joint. It can cross multiple joints. So if we think about, what's the best one? So the pectoralis major crosses one joint. It only crosses the shoulder joint. Our hamstrings will cross the knee and the hip joint. So they cross two joints. Okay, so they'll cross at least one joint. It works in its line of fiber. So my pectoralis major, line of fibers run in this direction, so they'll work in that direction. My bicep muscles, line of fiber runs in this direction, so they will work in this direction. Okay. And they work in pairs. So if we think about the biceps is paired up with the triceps. Our quadriceps on the front of the thigh are paired up with our hamstrings at the back. So as one muscle contracts, the opposing muscle will relax. So if I contract my bicep, my tricep will relax. If I contract my tricep, my bicep will relax. Okay with that? Okay, so as we said, they work in pairs. Front and back, biceps and triceps. So when we do exercise, we've got our muscles doing different jobs while we do an exercise. So our first type of muscle that we're going to look at is our prime mover, the agonist muscle. So this is the muscle responsible for bringing about the action. So when we do a bicep curl, the agonist muscle is the bicep, the muscle that we're working. Okay. When we do a, let me think, when we do a chest fly, can anybody tell me what the agonist muscle would be for that? We're doing a chest fly. What
Major?
is my pectoralis major? Good, yeah. So pectoralis major would be my agonist, my prime mover. So the muscle responsible for bringing about the action. When I do an abdominal curl, what muscle is responsible for bringing about the action? An ab crunch.
Your rectus abdominal?
Good. Rectus abdominis is the muscle responsible for bringing about the action.
On the pec major agonist, what would be the antagonist? What would be the muscle that relaxed when you were doing the chest press on your major?
I'll just come on to that now. So our next one that we're looking at is the antagonist muscle. So the antagonist muscle is the opposite muscle that relaxes for movement to occur. So in our bicep curl, as we contract the bicep, the tricep will relax, allowing my bicep to contract. So my antagonist is the tricep. So to answer your question, in a pec fly, so my agonist muscle is the pectoralis major, as we've established. So the muscles that relax to allow me to do this movement here would be trapezius and rhomboids. Okay, because if they stayed switched on, I wouldn't be allowed to do this movement. Okay, so trapezius and rhomboids at the back. They
This
would
might
be
be
the
a
antagonists.
really stupid question.
No, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry.
Someone has like, you know, like just completely full of muscle.
Yep.
Can the muscle that would be the, is it the relaxers on the that antagonist one?
Yeah.
Could that like kind of start coming in, even though it's supposed to be relaxing? If there's too much muscle there, could that still be using a little bit or not? Will that never happen?
Okay, so what we might find is there might be imbalances where if we say, for example, a lot of people who work chest and don't work enough back, the chest will be tight and the back will be weaker. So if they try to work their back, they might be restricted in the movement that they do because of the tightness in the chest. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It won't ever come into play. Now, what might happen is, so if I'm doing chest flies and I squeeze forwards like this, as I slowly release out and as my pectoralis major relaxes, I'm working the eccentric phase. Okay, which basically means is as I'm coming back. Okay, so as the muscle lengthens, I can still work the muscle. If I'm working my back, so say I'm doing a reverse fly, so if I've got a bar in front, handles in front, and I'm pulling them wide to work my upper back, as I do that, my pectoralis major have to relax. If they're really tight, then I might be restricted. I might be not able to pull as wide because these are taking over and restricting the movement of the back. So this is why we need to, when we're programming, we need to really think about balance in our workouts. So we make sure that we don't have anything that's going to inhibit that movement of the agonist muscle. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So if it was like stopping you from doing it, then how would you go about like stopping it from stopping you, if that makes sense?
Stretching.
Like if it can do, oh yeah.
Yeah. So if my pectoralis major is tight and it's restricting my work from my back, what I'd probably need to do is, if this is really tight, then I need to do a lot of stretching to release this muscle a lot more. You know, you've got like sports massage, which can help it as well. Those kind of massage guns can help it, but flexibility. So we would look to increase the flexibility of that muscle to relieve the tension in that muscle, so then we can get more work done on the opposing muscle group or agonist. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Cool, no worries. So just to understand, just to quickly recap then, so our agonist muscle is the muscle responsible for bringing about the action. So if we do a leg extension exercise, my quadriceps would be my prime mover agonist. My antagonist then, can anybody tell me what the antagonist would be for that?
Hamstring.
Hamstrings, good. So the hamstrings will have to relax for the quadriceps to contract. And vice versa, if I'm doing a hamstring curl, as we contract the hamstrings will be the agonist, and then my antagonist will be the quadriceps. So we always work in opposites. Okay, so what we've looked at there is mainly isolation exercises where we are just using one joint. So on a bicep curl, we're only using the elbow joint. On a pec fly, we're only using the shoulder joint. On a leg extension, we're only using the knee joint. If we move into compound exercises, so for compound movements where we've got multiple joint actions, we've also got synergists. So the synergists are the muscles that assists or modifies the movement of the prime mover. So in a chest press, the triceps brachii and deltoid will assist the pectoralis major. So for a chest press, I'm in this position and I'm pushing forwards. So as I push forwards, the pectoralis major is my main muscle bringing about the action. So that's my agonist, prime mover, but also the triceps and the deltoid are going to help. Make sense?
Would that be fair to say that that's like a secondary muscle assisting the prime mover?
Exactly that.
Put it in simple terms.
So you still working that muscle then, just not as much as your main muscle?
Yes. Yeah, you're still working that muscle, just not as much as the prime mover.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people, when they do press ups, okay, so press ups is the same muscle groups as a chest press. So it's the same action, you're just doing it in a different position. So when people do press ups, sometimes they feel their arms, their triceps give way before their chest because maybe they've got a weakness or a weaker in their triceps. So you'll ask somebody who's doing a press up, where do you feel it working? And they're like, oh, the backs of my arms or my shoulder, not so much their chest, because the arms are kind of taken over. Yeah. So you're definitely working those muscles. And sometimes, you know, if people want to increase the strength in their arms, they'll do push-ups because it's going to work the triceps and it's going to work the deltoid on the shoulder. Yes, it will work their chest as well. And that is the main muscle that is bringing about the action. But because they maybe have a weakness in the triceps, that's why they feel it more there. But they will still work it. So a couple of other examples. So if we think about a lat pull down, so a lat pull down as I work from here down to here, as I'm pulling, what do we think my agonist muscle would be for that? So my prime mover. I'm working from here to here.
That'd be the do you say agonist or antagonist?
Agonist.
The lat pull down would be the latissimus
dorsi.
Latissimus dorsi.
Good, yes. So the latissimus dorsi would be my agonist. So what's going to be my helper then? There's only one with these. What's going to help?
Be bicep.
Good.
Maybe tricep.
Not tricep, just bicep. Yeah, so it's from here to here, just so you can see me. So from this position to this position, we've got elbow flexion, so the bicep is helping. Okay, so my latissimus dorsi down the side is my main muscle that I'm working, but my bicep is helping out. Make sense? So then what would be my antagonist, so the opposite to the prime mover. So if my prime mover is my latissimus dorsi.
It is.
Would it be your delts?
Good, yes, deltoids. So my deltoids are going to relax to allow my latissimus dorsi to contract. Okay. So when we're talking about antagonists, we only look at the opposite to the agonist. We don't have to look at opposites to the synergists.
So what was the bicep in that then? I thought you said that one was a...
So the bicep is a synergist, a helper.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, okay. So my latissimus dorsi is doing the main work, and my bicep is helping to pull the bar down. It's helping the latissimus dorsi. Okay, with me? We got one more.
Yeah.
So we've got fixators. So fixators are the muscles that stabilize the part of the body that remains fixed. So for example, the shoulder girdle muscles will stabilize the scapula to allow efficient movement at the shoulder joint. So when I do my chest press, as I push forwards, what we don't want is all of this going on while I'm doing my chest press. So my shoulder girdle now, what we can talk about here is our rotator cuff muscles. We don't need to know the rotator cuff muscles for level 2, but our rotator cuff muscles will tense or cause tension to basically keep our scapula stable. So it'll stop any, as we push forwards, what we don't want is people lifting their shoulders up. We want to keep the shoulders and we want to keep them in, and the shoulder girdle in that fixed position. So our rotator cuff muscles will switch on to just stabilize that area. If we think about it,
sorry to interrupt, could you just explain the shoulder girdle muscles?
Okay, so we've got the rotator cuff. So the rotator cuff muscles include, and you don't need to know these, subscapularis, infraspinatus, supraspinatus, and teres minor. So there's 4 muscles that surround the scapula. The shoulder girdle is basically starts up here. So our deltoids would be part of the shoulder girdle. Okay, but obviously as we do our chest press, our deltoids are helping out. But those muscles that surround the scapula are rotator cuff muscles. They will help to stabilize that scapula in position. So it stops the scapula from moving around as we do our chest press. Is that okay?
Yeah, thanks, mate. Yeah, I got it.
Cool, no worries. There are lots and lots of other muscles in there as well, little smaller ones that we don't really need to know about, which will act as stabilizers as well. But if we think about our main stabilizers being our rotator cuff for chest press, for a seated row as well, our rotator cuff will do a lot of work. Even for our lat pull down, our shoulder presses, anything around the shoulder, those rotator cuff muscles will do a lot of work to help stabilize. Okay, if we do a squat, okay, as we do squats, what you might find as some people do squats is that their knees can come in as they squat or their knees can go out as they squat. So our fixator muscles, so on the inside thigh and outside thigh, will switch on to stabilize and keep the knees running in a straight line rather than knocking in or knocking out as we squat. So the abductor muscles on the outside thigh and the adductor muscles on the inside thigh will basically maintain to keep the knees in position forwards as we do squats. Okay. We could argue that every single other muscle in the body is a stabilizer. So if I was to do a standing bicep curl, my agonist is my bicep, my antagonist is my tricep. I don't have any fixators because it's only a one joint movement. But then we could say, because I'm standing, every single other muscle in the body is keeping me stable as I do my bicep curl. Yep. So we think about core stability, stabilizer muscles. Core stability should be switched on for every exercise that we do. So we could class our core stability muscles as fixators for every single exercise. Is that making sense?
What would be the fixator for a lat pull down?
Okay, so a lat pull down, what I'm looking for is to pull down, if I do it side on maybe, I'm looking to pull down in this position here. Now, what I don't want any of this movement, and I don't want any of this movement. So to prevent this movement occurring, my pectoralis major will switch on to keep my arm forwards. To stop this movement from happening, my trapezius and rhomboids will stop it from going forwards and backwards. So to keep me in this straight line as I work, my pectoralis major and trapezius and rhomboids, as well as my rotator cuff muscles, will keep everything in line. See how that happens?
So it is everything around then, just to
Yeah.
hold it in place.
Yeah, we could say that every single muscle, except for the ones that we're working, are our fixators. So we think about when we keep posture, keep good posture, shoulders back and down, chest proud. So my pectoralis major, my trapezius and rhomboids are switching on a bit to keep me in this position. Because if they didn't, so if I relaxed my trapezius and rhomboids, then I'm going to end up in this position. If I relax my pectoralis major, then I'm going to end up kind of shoulders back, which is not a bad thing really, because most posture is forwards. But can you see what I mean? If one switches off, the other takes over. So we get an imbalance. Okay with that? Okay.
Yeah.
Is everybody happy with those? So what I'm going to send you today as well is I've got like a little handout thing that when you're in the gym, you can bring the handout with you. And as you're doing exercises, you can then write down, okay, what's my agonist muscle during this exercise? What's my antagonist muscle for this exercise? What's my synergist for this exercise? And what would be an example of some of the fixators with this exercise? So it'll help you kind of learn the location of the muscles for one, but also when you're doing specific exercises, what specific muscles am I actually working for this exercise? And that will really help when it comes to programming and planning sessions for your clients to make sure you've got a good balanced workout for them, that you're pretty much hitting every major muscle group of the body for, depending if you're doing split sessions or if you're doing a whole body session. But, you know, the goal of having a balanced workout. Okay. Any questions on that?
No, not right now, thanks.
Okay, cool. Remember, if anything does crop up at any point, just shout. Okay, so the types of muscle contraction we're going to look at then. Can anybody tell me what the types of muscle contraction are? Any idea of what our different types of muscle contraction are?
Concentric and eccentric.
Concentric and eccentric. Good. There's one or two more. Ah, no, I brought them all up. I thought I was just bringing up one by one. Okay, so concentric first of all. So this is where the muscle develops tension and shortens, overcoming load and gravity. So if we remember concentric as muscle shortening, that's the main thing. What we also thinking about is the load and the gravity. So what weight we're using in our hand. Okay, so if I'm doing a bicep curl, I might have a dumbbell in my hand. So I'm overcoming the load and I'm overcoming gravity trying to pull it back down to the floor. So concentric contraction with a weight is where the muscle develops tension, it shortens, overcoming the load as in being able to lift the load and to stop gravity from pulling it back down to the floor. The opposite of that is our eccentric phase, our eccentric contraction, where the muscle lengthens with tension, resisting gravity, as in not doing that. Okay, so we can resist it, returning the load, our weight, to the starting position in a controlled manner. So we don't just let it drop. So our eccentric contraction is where a muscle lengthens, resisting gravity and returning the weight back down to the starting position. Happy with those?
Yeah.
Cool. Our isometric contraction then is simply a static or held contraction. Can you give me an example of any exercises where you would do a static or held isometric contraction?
Is that like a plank or not?
Perfect. Yes, plank, because you're just holding that position. Yep. So it's an isometric contraction. There's no lengthening or shortening of the muscles. They're just in that one position, but they have got tension. A wall squat would be another one. Yeah. So as you sit on the wall, sit in the wall squat, you're holding that position. Okay. And an isotonic contraction is where we've got both concentric and eccentric phases. So as I do my bicep curls, I've got concentric and eccentric phases, so we can classify it as isotonic. There's movement. Running, we would think about isotonic because there's constant contraction, relaxation, shortening, lengthening, shortening, lengthening, shortening, lengthening of muscles. Any questions on those?
With
No.
the concentric and the eccentric ones,
Yeah.
did you say like the one just going up and one just going down, or are they just two different things?
So one is shortening, one is lengthening. So if I'm doing my bicep curl, my bicep muscle is shortening. So that's the concentric phase. As I return my weight, the muscle is lengthening. So that's the eccentric phase. Okay. So one is where the muscle shortens, the other is where the muscle lengthens. So concentric is where the muscle shortens, eccentric is where the muscle lengthens.
Oh, so if with a bicep curl, then it is just isotonic because you're doing both of them.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because you're doing both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good stuff. Okay, so muscle fiber types then we're looking at. So with this, skeletal muscles are made from several different types of fiber and vary in two ways: their color and the speed of their contraction. So what we're looking at are our two main muscle fiber types. So we've got slow twitch fibers and fast twitch fibers. So I'll go through this table and then I'll have a chat in a bit more detail about it. So our characteristics of slow twitch fibers. They are known as type 1 muscle fibers. They are slow oxidative fibers, so they need lots and lots of oxygen supply for them to work properly. So they use oxygen, but they use it slowly. They are red in color. They contain large numbers of mitochondria. So mitochondria are our powerhouses. So they contain our energy, they contain our nutrients, they contain our water, oxygen, and water, which is supplied to the muscle. So we got lots and lots of energy supply, we've got lots and lots of water supply and nutrient supply to those muscles. And they're used in endurance type activities. So we think about long distance runners, triathletes, can't even think now, basically endurance type events. On the other side of the scale, we've got our fast twitch fibers, which are also known as type 2 fibers. They are fast glycolytic fibers. So their main energy source is glycogen. Okay. And they're used fast. Okay. So they don't last very long. They're white in color. They contain low numbers of mitochondria. So they don't have a big energy supply. They don't have a big nutrient supply. Very kind of low supply of that energy and nutrients. They're used for mainly strength or anaerobic type activities. So power-based activities. So things like sprints, power lifts, explosive movements. Okay, so when we look at a sport or an individual, we can kind of think about, okay, are they predominantly using fast twitch muscle fibers or predominantly using slow twitch muscle fibers? Or are they using a combination of the both? There is another muscle fiber type, which is called type 2A, and they are our hybrid fiber types. Okay, so they can be either one way or the other. Okay, so if we think about if you guys play any sports or you're doing any activities or the type of training that you're doing at the moment, are you predominantly training your fast twitch fibers or are you predominantly training your slow twitch fibers? So if anybody is training like long distances or doing long, slow duration training, you're predominantly working your slow twitch muscle fibers. If you're doing more heavy weight training and explosive movements, you're predominantly working your fast twitch muscle fibers. Any questions on those? Right, so what I've got next on these slides are the different muscles of the body. Now, I'm not going to go through, just to give you, before I do that, sorry, I forgot about this slide here. So muscle origins and insertions. So some general rules to help you understand muscle origins and insertions. You don't need to know the muscle origins and insertions of each individual muscle, but just know that the origin of the muscle is usually nearer the midline of the body or superior. So this is where the muscle starts. So if we think about the pectoralis major muscle, near the midline of the body, so it starts here at the origin and then moves out to the insertion away from the midline, or if we look at the bicep, inferior. So the bicep, our origin starts superior and our insertion starts inferior. Okay. So just know those rules. So the origin where the muscle starts, and then it'll cross the joint to the insertion, usually away from or inferior. There are some exceptions. So some muscles that run vertically reverse this rule, rectus abdominis. So the origin would be on the pubis bone, inferior. The insertion would be on the lower ribs. Okay, don't worry too much about that. It's not really going to come up in the exam, but just be aware that there are some exceptions to the rule. Okay, so got a little chart here which shows you your the muscles of the body and location. If we look at quadriceps here, you don't need to know the 4 individual quadricep muscles. All you need to know is quadriceps. Okay, similarly with that's the only one they've done. Sorry. So hamstrings, there are 3 different hamstrings. You just need to know hamstrings. Okay. Then what I've done is I have broken down each of the sections of the body. I've put in a diagram of or a picture of the muscle itself. Now I've put the origin, I've put the insertion, I've put the joints crossed and joint action. As I said, you don't need to know the origin insertion, but it's interesting to know what joints it crosses and what joint action occurs when it contracts concentrically, when it shortens. Okay. And then I'm not going to go through every one of these, but you can see what I've done with each one. Okay, so with the lower limb, so iliopsoas, hip flexors, I've broken it down into 2. You don't need to know the 2 names. So when you're doing these, look at the heading, the name at the top. That's the name you need to know. But just so you can see, there are 2 of them. You don't need to know the 2 names. You just need to know iliopsoas or hip flexors. Similarly then with, where did I go? Where am I gone? With gluteals, so gluteus maximus you need to know, and abductors you need to, both of those say gluteus minimus. Change that. So gluteus minimus and gluteus medius are your abductors. So all you need to know is gluteus maximus and abductors. The adductors, there's 3 of them. You just need to know adductors. Okay with that? Hamstrings, quadriceps, that's all you need to know. Okay. So the one I'm just going to show you quickly is this one. So because some questions do come up on the paper on the pelvic floor, and mainly asking you the function of the pelvic floor muscles and what it does. So they are situated under the pelvis, a double-layered muscle consisting of a deep and superficial layer of muscle tissue and connective tissue. So their function, it provides stability for the pelvic girdle, it controls organs and the growing fetus in pregnancy, and it also controls continence. Okay, so just double check on that one because a couple of questions have come up on the paper on pelvic floor muscles. And that, pretty sure, is it for muscular system. Any questions, comments on any of that? Okay, so let me just stop the recording.